come through for them, as is the middle class. We can't afford to let them down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, my cousin, Mr. Scott.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from South Carolina and looking forward to visiting the family at Christmas. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House and this great country, as I traveled cities like Covington, Warner Robins, and Tifton, Georgia this past week, the main issue I heard from constituents was their growing fear of the size of government's regulatory burden on their business and their way of life. Now, I find it laughable that today Democrats say that they didn't know this 1099 provision was in this bill. The fact is, this 1099 provision was part of a continuous assault by the Democratic Party on small businesses across this country. Now, eliminating this provision will further reduce the government's burden placed on these businesses. And as a small business owner myself, I know from personal experience that passing this resolution will allow employers the time necessary to focus on creating jobs rather than dealing with the burden of government paperwork. Mr. Speaker, I urge my fellow colleagues to vote in favor of repealing this overbearing, burdensome, job-killing 1099 provision that the Democrats put into that bill. And as Thomas Jefferson once said, when the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Mr. Speaker, it is time to liberate our people, our small businesses, from the burdens of this 1099 provision. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman controls his time. Gentleman from Colorado.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman, state his inquiry.
Does Section 4 of H.R. 4 violate the rules of the House by proposing a tax increase?
Is the gentleman asking about the underlying bill or the resolution?
The inquiry is regarding the underlying bill.
The bill is not yet pending. The gentleman is asking for an advisory opinion. The chair will not issue such an opinion.
I thank the gentleman. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman. So, I think this is a question of how cleverly or perhaps deviously the majority party constructed the rules of the House with regard to a test as to whether presenting a family earning $80,000 a year with a bill for $3,000 from the IRS is a tax increase or not. It would take some pretty fancy tap dancing to say that a $3,000 or $4,000 bill from the IRS to a middle-class family is not a tax increase. If it looks like a tax increase, if it smells like a tax increase, it is a tax increase. And it is contrary to the rules of the House to allow a tax increase in this kind of bill. Now, I understand there's some fancy dancing and semantics around it, but I think the American people and the voters of this country have a great deal of common sense with regard to this matter. When you get a $3,000 bill from the IRS that you have to pay, and if you don't pay, as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle like to point out during the debate on the health care bill, you could face going to prison, that's a tax increase. That's a tax increase. What this bill does is tell hundreds of thousands of middle-class families, particularly right on that cusp. We talk about this 400% of poverty rate. Again, that's a arbitrary level, but it's a real level for families. It's X dollars. Now, it depends on the size of the family, it depends on the state, but we're talking $80,000, $90,000 a year, right in that range. You earn, as my friend from New York pointed out, $250 more. The IRS sends you a bill, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and if you don't pay it, you face going to prison. I yield to my friend from New York.
I thank the gentleman. I was attempting to ask the gentleman from Georgia to yield so I could ask him a question. What part of what I said about the family of four earning $88,000 and getting a bonus of $250 and their exposure then to $4,460 in taxes was untrue? He was on a diatribe of his talking points about small businesses. We understand small businesses, the burden that was placed there. We were trying to remove that from them, but not to place it on the backs of the middle class. Understanding he wanted to remove the burden from small business, but to place it on the backs of the middle class, that was the question I've asked. And by the way, I haven't heard one colleague from the other side of the aisle refute what I said about that family of four. Not one person has stood up and said You're wrong, Mr. Crowley. That will not take place. That potentially will not take place if this bill passes. The silence is deafening from the other side. They know it's a tax increase on the middle class, Mr. Polis.
Reclaiming my time, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes of the time to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from South Carolina for yielding. This is great. You know, it's very interesting to listen to this concern. When I was actually out on the campaign trail, I talked to a lot of small business owners. These small business owners were fired up. This is exactly what they're saying is wrong with Washington. More and more government regulation, more and more paperwork, and this is exactly what we have to clean up now after 4 years of what we've been dealing with. Mr. Chairman, as a new member, I was not in the body when the Democrat majority passed this job-destroying regulation, taxes on every sector of our economy. But as I did go around, I heard from businesses like Mussman Back Acres in Kankakee County in my district, and I heard about the illogical burden that this would place on them, the people they'd have to hire just to take care of this requirement. One of the most illogical requirements, I can say, of the health care bill. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. The 1099 requirement impacts small business disproportionately by requiring them to file and collect 1099 tax forms for any business transaction, any one, over $600 or more per year. These new requirements in a time when businesses can't afford it. Actually, if you'd allow me to keep speaking, I would appreciate that. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation to strip the 1099 requirement on business. This body will continue to remove the undue burden on small businesses, the undue burden on society in general that was placed out of this body for the last 4 years. It is high time that the Republican majority comes in here and begins to fight for small business and begins to fight for the American people.
The gentleman has already indicated he does not wish to yield.
Not to the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not through you. He indicated directly to me, and I'm speaking to the Speaker.
The gentleman has indicated his unwillingness to yield time.
I appreciate it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Gentleman shall continue.
Thank you. As I was saying, it is time now for the Republican majority, and frankly with many colleagues on the other side, many of your colleagues, that have said it's time to make small business work again, it's time to give them the freedom to hire people back, and it's time to take our country back, get people back to work, rein in government spending, and put government where it should be, limited, effective, and efficient. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Colorado.
I yield 20 seconds to my friend from New York.
Just once again, I asked the gentleman to yield. He refused to yield because he has no answer but that I'm correct. The example that I gave of a family of four making $88,000 would have a huge tax increase because of this bill of $4,460. You refuse to yield because you know you cannot refute what I'm stating here on the floor.
The other side, how many remaining speakers they have?
We have 4.
Okay, I'm the last speaker. It's possible we'll have one more come down, but I'm going to reserve the balance of my time to allow a couple speakers to go through.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Holcomb.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from South Carolina. Today I rise in support of H.R. 4. This bill will repeal one of the most egregious and anti-jobs, anti-growth provisions contained in last year's health care law. This 1099 provision threatens our small business owners with an avalanche of paperwork and bureaucracy, when Congress should instead be doing everything in our power to help employers create jobs. My constituents have told me loud and clear what this means to them. One small business owner in my district told me that just last year alone, she had more than 500 transactions that she would have had to report under this provision, and the expense and enormous regulatory burden on her and her employees. She called it ridiculous, and I think she's understating things. I hope Congress will overwhelmingly pass this bill. Let's liberate our small business owners from the mountain of paperwork and instead let them get back to work, creating jobs, moving our economy forward. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute of my time to the gentleman from Nevada, Dr. Heck.
Gentleman from Nevada is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the gentleman from South Carolina. Mr. Speaker, today I also rise in support of H.R. 4, the Small Business Paperwork Mandate Elimination Act of 2011. There is no doubt this job-killing 1099 hidden tax deserves repeal.
Nevada's unemployment rate is a nation-high 14.5%. We need to create jobs. 80% of Nevada's employees work for small businesses. So I asked small business owners what the government should do to create jobs. Paul Bueller, a small business owner, operates Midas shops throughout southern Nevada, buys multiple auto parts from multiple vendors, said regulations and hidden taxes like the 1099 hidden tax keep him from hiring new workers. You know what? More than 170 small business organizations nationwide agree with Paul and have called for the 1099 hidden taxes repealed. No, Mr. Speaker, I shall not yield. Washington said it wants to hear job-creating ideas from the business community. Here's one that they are screaming about. Nevada's families are hurting. American families are hurting. It's time to end the job-killing 1099 hidden tax and get Nevadans back to work. And I yield the balance.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Colorado.
Since the gentleman from New York has been unable to enter into a colloquy with the several gentlemen that he has sought to, I'll yield 45 seconds to the gentleman from New York.
I appreciate the time from the gentleman from Colorado. I've attempted so far again to ask two more gentlemen from the other side of the aisle to yield for the purposes of answering a question. I've noticed that not a single one as of yet has refuted the example that I gave of a family of four earning $88,000 a year, getting a $250 bonus, being pumped up over the 401 percentile of the federal poverty level, and be exposed to a $4,460 tax. I wonder, when the gentlemen were out campaigning last year and talking to small businesses, did you talk to the middle class? Did you talk to the middle class about the increase in the tax that you would propose when you came to the floor of the House? One of the first bills, number 4, the fourth bill to increase taxes on the middle class. Did you talk to those folks? Did you let them know what you were doing to them? I suspect not. You have two more speakers who can now refute what I've said. I'm waiting.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Regal.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank my friend and the gentleman from South Carolina for yielding, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a business owner for more than 20 years, I know firsthand that excessive tax paperwork and compliance matters are already major expenses to our small businesses, and the new reporting requirements included in the health care law will substantially increase those costs. These new requirements impose yet another burden on small businesses, forcing them to devote more resources to filing taxes instead of going out and doing what they do best, which is to create jobs. You know, in Virginia alone, small businesses make up nearly 98% of all business establishments and account for — no, I will not. The gentleman's question that he is persistent with is not germane.
Mr. Speaker, will the
and
gentleman
account
yield?
for more than 75% of new job growth. And according to a study by the Small Business Administration, the cost of complying with the tax code is 66% higher for small businesses as compared to large businesses.
To yield.
You know, these reporting requirements are a classic example of laws that are passed by people who have no clue what it means to go out and to create a job, to put precious capital at risk. They're created, these laws, by people who have never met with a banker and have been told by a banker, no, I can't help you. So this bill, H.R. 4, is a step in the right direction to help our small business owners. I strongly urge my colleagues to stand with me in voting in favor of it. I yield back and thank the gentleman for yielding.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Colorado.
After continuing to be amazed that the gentleman from Virginia somehow said that a tax increase is not a tax increase, which is not germane, I'm happy to yield 15 seconds to the gentleman from New York.
Not germane. That's the answer. A $4,460 tax increase is not germane to the debate we're having right now. What is? The $25 billion doesn't fall out of the sky, out of the air. It has to come from somewhere. It is a tax increase on the middle class. You know it. We all know it.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Dr. Andy Harris.
Thank you very much,
Gentleman from
Mr.
Indiana is
Speaker.
recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, as if businesses weren't struggling enough with the worst recession since the Great Depression, some Washington bureaucrat decided it was a good idea to distract the real job creators of our country from doing what they do best, create jobs. to the gentleman from New York. That's what this debate is about, whether that hypothetical family actually has a job. But whether they should be distracted from creating jobs by requiring them to fill out mountains of 1099 paperwork.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield?
Obviously, the individual who came up with this brilliant idea has never had to meet a payroll
I make a request of the
or
Speaker.
deal with the day-to-day operations
The
of small
gentleman
business.
controls his time. The gentleman, by his silence, is not willing to yield. The
Mr.
gentleman
Speaker,
shall
Thank you very much,
continue.
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker.
Speaker, point of parliamentary
Small
procedure.
business owners all over my district
Speaker,
have
point
told
of
me
parliamentary procedure.
that the 1099 provision would hurt their business.
Gentleman from Indiana,
Mr. Speaker?
suspend, please.
Trish Date, who co-owns Rittenhouse Fuel Services with her husband in Perry Hall, said it would be, quote, an administrative nightmare that would cost me thousands of dollars to implement.
He won't yield.
Last year, she used over 250 individual vendors that will now require 1099 forms to be printed, copied, mailed, completed, and sent to the vendors in the IRS. Her small family-owned business simply does not have the resources or capacity to handle this onerous regulation. Another business owner, Karen Ortel, whose family owns and operates the Harris's Crab House on the Eastern Shore, said this 1099 mandate would be, quote, overwhelmingly burdensome on my family business. Mr. Speaker, the 1099 provision is simply a job-destroying regulation that wastes precious time, labor, and money. If we want to create jobs tomorrow, I urge my colleagues to join me in repealing this awful provision now by supporting H.R. 4. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. Gentleman from Colorado.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes, or as much time as he may consume, to the gentleman from California, the chairman of our
Gentleman
Rules
from
Committee,
California is
Mr.
recognized.
Dreyer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without
Mr.
objection.
Speaker, let me first say that we all know why we're here. There is a bipartisan consensus that the 1099 provision in this bill is flawed. It's a mistake. And what it says to me is that the health care bill is badly flawed. And we all recall the very famous statement that was made, we have to pass this bill before we can understand what's in it. I'm trying to remember who said that. Somebody said that. Somebody very prominent said that. So here we have a measure that is badly flawed. There's bipartisan consensus, 278 co-sponsors of Mr. Lundgren's bill, and as Mr. Lundgren said at the outset, Democrats were discouraged from co-sponsoring it because by co-sponsoring the measure, they admitted that this outrageous health care bill was flawed. Well, it got to the point where the President of the United States in his news conference right after the election said the bill needs to be fixed, the 1099 provision needs to be fixed. So he was acknowledging right there that it was flawed. Now we have this big debate on cut-go and how we're paying for this, and I'd be happy to yield to my friend who's been requesting time to ask the question that I know he's going to ask me because I've heard it a million times over the last few minutes. I'm happy to yield to my friend.
Well, no, by purpose of the last time, Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of a parliamentary inquiry.
I'm yielding to my friend. The Speaker doesn't need to do it. I'm yielding to my
Mr.
friend.
Speaker, the reason for my asking for my colleagues to yield was to inquire as to the procedures of the House, that when I asked the Speaker for a party on the other side to
yield. Well, reclaiming my time, Mr. Speaker, I asked him to ask me the question that
I will ask that as well.
So
I will ask that as well. What of the example I gave you of a family of 4 earning $88,000 a year who get a bonus? How many here have heard of a bonus of $250? That gets a bonus because they worked hard. They get that bonus. They're now in the 401 percentile of the federal poverty level. They get a bill from the IRS for $4,460. What part of that is not a tax
Reclaiming
increase?
my time, Mr. Speaker,
Thank you.
I will answer my friend by saying the following. It is a subsidy that has provided that opportunity for that taxpayer. It is a subsidy. This is scored by the Congressional Budget Office. Could I finish the answer to the question? Because I know the gentleman has been interrupting repeatedly members, and I usually, as I ask people to yield, try not to do it more than 3 times. And the gentleman has asked 3, 4, 5 times
Maybe
for some of our new members to yield when they're doing 1-minute speeches. But let me just say that this is scored by the Congressional Budget Office, Mr. Speaker. It is scored as not as a tax increase. It is scored as a spending cut. And I know what the Joint Committee on Taxation has said, but they rely on the Congressional Budget Office as they look to this. And so the fact is, what this comes down to is returning an improper government subsidy, and that is not a tax increase. And so if I could complete my statement, Mr. Speaker, now that I've answered the question posed by the gentleman, this bill itself is, in fact, a badly flawed measure, the Obama health care bill. And for that reason, it is absolutely essential that we provide the kind of relief that every small business in this country deserves. And so we're in a position where we have done this in, I believe, the most proper way. The gentleman's amendment doesn't comply with the cut-go provision that we have. And so for that, Mr. Speaker, for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I am going to encourage my colleagues to support this rule. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado.
I'd like to inquire as if the gentleman has any remaining speakers.
We do not.
Very well. Then I will yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Look, in a climate of a fragile economic recovery, the last thing we want to do is punish people for getting a raise or earning a few extra dollars by working an extra job. Now, Mr. Speaker, this bill is intended to help small businesses, and that's something that we all agree with. I ran a small business before I was elected to Congress, and there's great support from both sides of the aisle to making sure that we reduce the 1099 reporting requirements for small businesses and people who happen to have a rental home. But this is a situation of thanks but no thanks. Thanks for saying I don't have to fill out an extra form because I bought a $600 refrigerator for my rental property, but no thanks because you're giving me a $5,000 bill from the IRS. This Republican proposal undoes a bipartisan agreement that passed overwhelmingly last Congress. Under this Republican pay-for, an average middle-class family could find out in January that they have to come up with $12,000 by April to send to the IRS with their tax return, or they could face going to prison. An extra $100 in overtime here and a $500 holiday bonus there could send a working family towards tax court. During the last Congress, the Republican Party complained of being left out of the process, and while we didn't always have an open rule, every major piece of legislation came to the floor under a structured rule. Members of both parties come to the Rules Committee and have their amendments vetted. Now, why aren't we through this rule offering the good idea that the gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren, offered? He said, why don't we remove the pay-for from this bill and simply disagree with CBO and see if we can pass it on that ground? Why are we not allowing the amendment from my friend from New York, who offered an amendment that would repeal the middle-class tax increase proposed in this Republican bill? The Crowley amendment would protect the middle class and maintain the bipartisan agreement that we had last year. Mr. Speaker, we all agree that the 1099 provisions in the Affordable Care Act need to be addressed. There's been excellent points made with that regard from members from both sides of the aisle. But this is not the way to do it, not on the backs of the middle class, not with a tax hike during a recession. Republicans are proposing a substantial tax hike for the middle class. Not only is that bad policy, but it's also a violation of the pledge that many of them signed, committing to oppose all tax increases. A tax increase is a tax increase. When you get a $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 bill from the IRS that you have to pay the IRS, it's called a tax increase. A tax increase. There's nothing else to call it. No fancy dancing, no fancy words can change the fact that a bill from the IRS is a tax increase, and families making $80,000, $90,000 a year will receive substantial tax increases on the Republican version of paying for this bill. Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to make it order Mr. Crowley's amendment to the bill. That amendment simply says that nothing in the bill will apply if it would result in a tax increase on anyone whose income is less than 500% of the federal poverty line. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record, along with extraneous material, immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
Thank you. I urge a no vote on the rule. I'll yield 30 seconds, gentleman from New York.
I appreciate the gentleman from Colorado once again for he and I to at least have some.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I urge a no vote on the rule, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Time has expired. Gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard a lot today about the cost and about taxes, about tax increases. We must be working from very different mathematical systems. They keep saying that we are raising taxes, and there's nothing further from the truth than the statements I've heard from the left. It is I will not yield. You have consistently interrupted many of our speakers, so I will not yield. But you have consistently posed a question that all of America needs an answer to. Is this, in fact, a tax increase? Well, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation, this is, in fact, a net tax cut of over $20 billion over the next 10 years, and it will reduce the deficit by $166 million over the same period of time. Let's also keep in mind that these cost savings come from the government recouping money. That the government recouping money, he is hard of hearing. The answer is no, I will not yield. From the government recouping the money that the recipients should not have gotten in the first place. That is not a tax increase. Let me say it one more time. That is not a tax increase. And if we're looking for a way, if we are looking for the way to actually get rid of this problem, it is a simple way to do that. Let's repeal the entire health care law. Because the problem that we see today comes in the package of the health care law itself. So consistent with reality is the fact that the Democrats have put us in this position. So we are working in a bipartisan fashion through the 1099 repeal to eliminate this problem. Finally, we should all bear in mind that while this resolution is a closed rule, the opposition was offered an opportunity to submit a substitute bill. They declined. We have also expanded debate to 2.5 hours. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I request the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Okay, now we're going to debate the next rule. As soon as Pete's ready, I'll... And who's the guy? Let me know when we're ready. For what purposes does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by direction on the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 128 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 12, House Resolution 128. Resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 662 to provide an extension of federal aid highway safety, motor carrier safety, transit, and other programs funded out of the Highway Trust Fund, pending enactment of a multi-year law reauthorizing such programs. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. 2. The amendment printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, if offered by Representative Mica of Florida or his designee, which shall be in order without intervention of any point of order, shall be considered as read, shall be separately debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, and shall not be subject to a demand for a division of the question. And 3. One motion to recommit with or without instructions.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman, my friend, Mr. Hastings from Florida, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 128 provides for a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 662. This rule provides for ample debate and opportunities for members on both sides of the aisle, both of the majority and minority, to make sure that they have ample time to participate, come to the floor, and express their ideas, which is what this new Republican majority is enabling members to do. I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. The underlying legislation is a simple extension of service transportation programs through September 30th of this year. This legislation was introduced by the distinguished chairman of the Transportation Committee, Chairman Mica, on February 11th, 2011, with Ranking Member Rahal as an original co-sponsor. It was reported out of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure by voice vote on February 28, 2011. This legislation went through regular order with bipartisan support. This is a clean, straight extension of current law, providing a hard freeze at 2009 spending levels through the end of this fiscal year. Without this legislation, the spending levels would expire on Friday, March the 4th, 2011. In an effort to provide more transparency and accountability of how this body has been run, which is different than how this body has been run for the past 4 years, the Republican conference adopted a policy that would no longer permit extensions of programs on a continuing resolution or any other appropriations bills. This allows members a straight up or down vote on an issue at hand, and in this case, it is surface transportation. The Surface Transportation Extension Act of 2011 continues the authorization of federal highway, transit, and highway safety programs through the end of this fiscal year at the same program funding levels established for fiscal year 2009. This authorization is essential to allow funds that have been included in transportation appropriations legislation to flow to states and local transit agencies. We are not trying to get in the way of decisions that need to be made locally. We're simply trying to make sure that they are legally executed. Should this straight extension of transportation funding not be signed into law before March the 4th deadline, the impact would be severe and immediate. A shutdown will result in immediate furloughs and suspension of payments to states, which would hamper the Federal Highway Administration's ability to pay contractors. This would jeopardize the state's transportation funding to a tune of $154 million a day, killing ongoing projects, things which had been agreed on and are being done locally. This level of funding was extended by the previous Congress 6 times starting in October of 2009. Continuing this funding at 2009 levels allows for the appropriate funding for states to complete and manage their transportation projects. With an extension through the fiscal year, it will allow the new chairman of the Transportation Committee, my dear friend, the gentleman, the favorite son of Florida, Mr. Michael, the appropriate time to hold necessary hearings to review and re-estimate the funding essential for states to carry on their transportation projects. The Congressional Budget Office, which is also known as the CBO, has concluded that the underlying bill today does not affect direct spending or revenues. Further, the CBO determined that, and I quote, "The non-tax provisions of H.R. 662 contain no intergovernmental or private sector mandates as defined in the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act and would impose no cost on state, local, or tribunal governments." End of quote. Additionally, according to the Department of Transportation, Surface transportation allows for international trade, which helps sustain and create jobs that support our national economy. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert recent data from the Department of Transportation's Bureau of Transportation Statistics to support this bill.
Without objection.
The data reported in the past 10 years says that U.S. surface transportation trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico has increased 48.6%, a 13.8% increase in the past year alone. In December 2010, imports were up from 41.9% compared to December 2000, which imports were up 57.7%. Currently, this trade is valued at $66.5 billion annually. In an ever-increasing global market, the United States needs to ensure that our surface infrastructure can sustain the tremendous growth rate of trade so that we can maintain international competitiveness, create jobs, and encourage economic growth in the United States of America. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and the underlying legislation. I applaud the Republican leadership for following regular order, for the bipartisan nature of this bill, for Republicans and Democrats working together through the entire process, and including the gentleman, Mr. Dreyer, the chairman of the Rules Committee, extending an unusual amount of time so that every single member has an opportunity to come to this body and not only voice what they believe is important to them, but also the time where they can come down and speak to important matters of this Congress. The chairman and ranking member continue to work together to provide a necessary extension that will get us through the rest of the year, and I look forward to an open and transparent process for the reauthorization for next year's funding also. I have confidence in not only Chairman Mica, but also John Boehner and Eric Cantor as they lead this House of Representatives on transportation issues to do what's right for a beautiful country that expects Congress to have an open and apparent process that is good for all members. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my good friend from Texas for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 662, the Surface Transportation Extension Act of 2011, prevents our nation's highway, transit, and safety programs from expiring ahead of the upcoming construction season by extending them at fiscal year 2010 funding levels through September 30 of this year. My friend from Texas referenced the fact that it would be bad if we did not do this before March 4th, and I agree with him thoroughly. I'm hopeful that he has the same attitude with reference to the overall aspect of any kind of shutdown of the government. A shutdown would be bad in any of its particulars, and not just as he referenced it, that I agree with in the area of transportation and infrastructure. This extension allows states to continue signing contracts, managing planning and construction, and paying for vital transportation and infrastructure projects while we finalize a multi-year authorization to update our network. As all of us know, our interstate highways, roads, and bridges are in desperate need of repairs and improvements, and all you have to do is drive around Washington to prove that. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, in their 2009 report card, which rates the operational condition and future capacity of dams, levees, railways, roads and bridges, and transit by letter grade, our nation's surface infrastructure is rated at a D. This is deplorable, and frankly, it's embarrassing. Embarrassing for several reasons. When I came here in 1992, we were advocating on both sides of the aisle that we should be about the business of repairing bridges in this country, and the multiples are enormous. From that time, we were talking 14,000 bridges. More than 26% of our nations today are either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. With the number of such bridges in urban areas on the rise, and we've seen what disasters can occur when a bridge collapses. Existing rail capacity is inadequate to handle future freight and passenger rail growth without significant investment. Last year, I took the Amtrak to New York, and when returning to Washington, I looked at the rail underbed. I grew up near a railroad in Altamont Springs, Florida. And the rail bed in that time, where I grew up in the 40s, was 100% better than the rail bed just outside of this city on the Amtrak line. That's ridiculous. Our interstate highway program has changed little since it was created in the 1950s by the distinguished President Dwight Eisenhower's vision. With ever-increasing congestion, and we see it right around here, and improvement costs, our nation's roads were even poorer at a D- in 2009. 1/3 of America's roads are in poor or mediocre condition, and 45% of major urban highways are congested. Just last January, the main road in and out of one of the cities that I'm privileged to represent, the city of Pahokee, was closed for 17 days because of sunken asphalt. Now, that may not sound like much, a little old town like Pahokee being cut off, but a collapsed culvert had created a 2-inch dip measuring 252 square feet in size on the northbound lane of State Road 715. This resulted in hours-long detours for commuters and trucks, stymied local and regional business, and regrettably reduced access to Glades General Hospital and Pahokee Airport. Similar stories can be found throughout my home state of Florida, and indeed in communities across this nation. We can and we must do better. Just as routine and preventive health care costs much less than a trip to the emergency room, regular maintenance and improvements cost less than major overhauls and replacement. According to Transportation for America, for every dollar that we spend today on maintenance, we avoid $14 in future costs. H.R. 662 obligates up to $42.5 billion for federal aid highway programs and $639 million for the equity bonus programs to ensure that states receive in federal highway funds a certain portion of the gasoline taxes that they contribute. Investing in our nation's roads is about more than getting from point A to point B faster, which would be, in many respects, reason enough for many commuters. It's about having more time, about having more money, about having more opportunities to work and play and live and enjoy life. Americans spend 4.2 billion hours a year stuck in traffic at a cost to the economy of $78.2 billion. That averages to $710 per motorist. Furthermore, poor conditions cost motorists $67 billion a year in repairs and operating costs. One way to ease congestion is getting more people to use public transit. In fact, transit use increased 25% between 1995 and 05, faster than any other mode of transportation. However, nearly half of American households do not have access to bus or rail transit, and only 25% have what they consider to be a good alternative. On that note, increasing the capacity of our transportation and infrastructure network means nothing if our roads are not safe. Each year, thousands of people die in road crashes in the United States, and millions more are injured or disabled. As co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Global Road Safety, I recognize that road crash fatalities and disabilities represent a serious public health concern. This extension authorizes $742 million for highway safety programs administered by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, as well as $597 million for truck safety activities of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration in order to help save lives and minimize crash-related injuries. Safe, dependable, and efficient transportation is essential to our economic recovery and our nation's competitiveness. At a time when unemployment in the construction industry is double the national rate, the extension provides much-needed market stability to create and sustain thousands of jobs. The transportation sector has played a crucial role in building the U.S. economy, most recently through the Recovery Act, which provided $27.5 billion in new funding for surface transportation programs through the existing federal aid highway program and $8.4 billion for transit. In addition, $1.5 billion and $600 million were made available in 2 rounds, respectively, by the discretionary grant program known as TIGER, the Transportation Investments Generating Economic Recovery. Extending these highway transit and other surface transportation programs is not only essential to our nation's continued economic recovery, but to our long-term prosperity and future. Today, we find ourselves on the cusp of a great opportunity. The opportunity to make meaningful investments in the future of this country, improve our quality of life, and cut future debt. We need a truly interconnected, multimodal system that effectively utilizes high-speed rail, light rail, streetcars, van pools, motor carriers by water, efficient buses, cars, and bikes. One that helps ensure that lower-income workers can also get to and hold down jobs. One that gets people where they need to go, increases our energy independence through new sources and innovative technologies, improves air quality, reduces traffic deaths and injuries, and creates jobs by supporting America's hard-hit construction and manufacturing sectors. It is imperative that we not only extend the surface transportation programs through the end of the current fiscal year, but also pass a multi-year, yes, multi-year, as many as 6-year reauthorization as soon as possible. A new multi-year surface transportation authorization will create even more jobs and ensure that we can meet our growing transportation needs in the 21st century in a way that is affordable, efficient, innovative, resilient, sustainable, and accountable. In this country, highways, roads, bridges, and transit are neither Democratic nor Republican. They serve all Americans and help bring us closer together, literally. I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Carlsbad, California, 5 minutes. The gentleman from the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Bill Bray.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the rule, and I'd just like to say, Mr. Speaker, that I think this is an opportunity for all of us, both Democrats and Republicans, to talk openly and frankly about the fact that we're appointing our history where we need to not only spend money, but we got to be smarter too. And I think too often in Washington we're thinking that our degree of efficiency or compassion is based on how much we spend, not how well we accomplish our goals. And I would only ask my colleague that just addressed us to join with some of us that say that we need to be smarter. And as a former member of the Air Resources Board in California, I can show you studies that have been done by very noted research people that really point out one study alone that says we could reduce fuel and emission problems by 22.6%. But to do that, we not have to address what is the private sector doing in Detroit in building cars, but what is the government sector doing in controlling those cars when they're on the road? And one of the biggest problems we have is that Washington sends money out for projects, but we do not hold those projects to a standard that has been upgraded to the 21st century standards. And I'll give you an example. There are studies that have shown that 97% of all stop signs that you and I stop for every day, Mr. Speaker, don't have to be stop signs. Those could be yield signs. Now, granted, there are those sites with sight distance problems where you have to have stops. But when you and I go drive down out of our home tomorrow morning, think about when you stop. Why are you stopping? It's not for safety. Lord forbid it's not for fuel consumption or for environmental conservation. It is because the law says you have to stop even though there is a cost in economic and environmental impact, and that the safety factor is not the factor being determined. It's easier for a local government to give you a ticket on a stop sign. At least that perception is there, when the yield sign is just as enforceable. Good example is why is a four-way stop always the easiest and cheapest way for a government to be able to control an intersection when everybody knows that a roundabout has been proven to be a major source of safety and environmental and economic benefit. The fact is that communities that have been brave enough to try new traffic control like the new computer-engineered roundabouts and traffic circles have not only proven that it reduces congestion by a huge amount because it stops the queuing approach, it also eliminates that pollution that stop signs cause by 5 times more polluting than allowing somebody to drive through an intersection at low speed that roundabouts would do. But it also eliminates, as the gentleman who just spoke brought out, the safety factor. A roundabout eliminates the T-boning where fatalities occur. That actually by going to the next generation of traffic control, we can not only address fuel consumption and pollution, but we can make our roads safer. So I really call on my colleagues on both sides of the aisle that let's look at making sure that when we send this money over to the states and the cities and the counties. I was a mayor. I ran the transit system, the San Diego trolley system. We helped build that system. But we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing in government. And one of the things that we're not doing in government that we can do and lead through example if we truly care about public safety, environmental protection, and fuel efficiency. If we really want to lead, let's not mandate on the private sector that they have to do something if we're not willing to look at our colleagues who are in government and say we have to reform ourselves. And I call on my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, let's work together. Let's start saying, look, local governments, counties and cities, the environmental, economic, and safety impacts of you not upgrading your traffic control to an efficient system is costing our economy 22.6% more than it should. It's costing our environment 22.6% that it shouldn't. And the fact is, we don't know how many lives we could save until we're willing to do that. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman, again, call on both sides. Let's get together, work on this, and set an example for the rest of the world. Now
Gentleman yields back his time.
I say to my colleague and friend from California, sign me up. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 4 minutes to the distinguished gentlewoman from Florida, the ranking member of the Railroad Subcommittee and my classmate. We came here together, Ms. Brown.
Gentlewoman from Florida is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, classmate, for giving me 4 minutes. I rise to speak on the rule. I would like to begin by discussing the importance of reauthorizing the Surface Transportation Bill. It's been a long time since we had a bill, since 2005, in fact, I cannot overemphasize the importance of completing this bill as soon as possible, not only to rebuild our nation's infrastructure, but the desperate needed jobs that it will create. Transportation projects are a national economic development tool. Department of Transportation has indicated for every $1 billion that we invest in transportation, it creates 42,000 permanent jobs and $2.1 billion in economic activity. It also saved 1.4 people lives. You can't argue with those numbers. Transportation fund is a win-win for everyone involved. States get to improve their transportation infrastructure that create economic development, put people back to work, enhance safety, and improve local communities. Yet, in delaying the passing of this much-needed legislation any further, we are doing a disservice to the driving population and the nation as a whole. The states are battling red ink, wants to see this bill pass. The construction companies who are laying off employees want to see this pass, and the citizens waiting in traffic jams, like my constituents in I-4 in Central Florida, want to see this bill pass. If this Congress fails to pass a real transportation funding bill, our nation's transportation infrastructure and the citizens who use it will suffer for years to come. There are numerous studies that have come out in the last few months documenting the current state of affairs, and many have indicated that the American Society of Civil Engineers have found that this country infrastructure ranked D, barely passing, certainly not acceptable for a superpower like the United States. So we need to really pass this bill and really pass a full 6 years reauthorization bill so the states can plan and the communities can plan for the transportation need. I have to take a moment to talk about high-speed rail because come Friday, it's a very sad state of affairs for the people of Florida because the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, have indicated that he's going to turn down $2.5 billion for federal high-speed rail funding. That's very sad for the people of Florida because we've worked for a number of years across the aisle. Mr. Michael and I have worked, and in fact, when I was first elected, for every dollar that we sent to Washington, we was receiving 77 cents in Florida, transportation dollars. I worked to change that formula, and now we get 92 cents, and that's $5 billion. Well, for once, Florida is in the opportunity to get some of their tax gasoline dollars back and to put Floridians to work. We have a 12% unemployment, and in fact, with the 90% funding from the federal government and the 10% private, that would generate over 60,000 jobs. But it is so sad, and it's really a no-brainer for the governor. He indicated he spent over $100 million to be the governor of the state of Florida, and he indicated that he want to put Floridians to work. Well, Mr. Governor, how are you going to put them to work? What are you going to work them on besides talk? What really put people to work is transportation and infrastructure, and it is a no-brainer, the high-speed rail project that the communities have worked on. In fact, in 1980, Bob Graham, being the governor, appointed me to a committee to work on high-speed rail. Let me just say, when there is no vision, the people perish. And the people of Florida...
If the gentlelady would suspend, I would yield the gentlelady an additional minute, and I would also take this opportunity, if she would yield to me, to ask her a question.
Gentlelady is recognized for an additional minute.
Yes, sir. And what's your question, sir?
The previous safety loop measure provided some funding for a high-speed rail corridor. This particular provision does not. But am I correct that if we were to do the high-speed rail project, that the lowest estimate is it would provide 30,000 jobs?
Sir, that is the lowest, but it will provide not just 60,000 jobs, because you're not just looking at the construction, but everywhere you build a station is economic development and it's jobs. And let me just say, this is a public-private. In other words, we would be contracting the jobs out. companies, private companies, will be building these stations. And in fact, over 8 different companies have indicated that they want to be partners with this. It's sort of the way we build airports. The federal government go in and put the major infrastructure down, and then private operate it.
I yield the gentlelady an additional 30 seconds.
You know, all I got to say is that I have ever seen. You know, the Bible says, without vision the people perish. The people of Florida are going to suffer. We have a 12% unemployment rate. That's, you know, when I say 12%, that's over 2 million people that's unemployed. This is the opportunity to put 60,000 people to work, and that translates not just in jobs. If you have a job, you can pay your mortgage, so the foreclosure go down, and so it goes on and on. I want to thank the President, the Vice President, the mayors, and all of the communities have worked together for this project. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.